Maverick News presents The Rick Walker Show. Defrag your mind.
Vladimir Putin sends a warning to the West. Nuclear war becomes a real possibility if the West sends troops into Ukraine. Pierre Poilievre has a message for the public, and it's pretty alarming as well. He's talking about Justin Trudeau's Winnipeg BioLab scandal. Later on in the broadcast, we'll dig into that. But coming up right after our intro, Jeanette Easton from Refound Ed will join us, our special feature interview tonight. If you're a parent, this will be of particular interest to you, and to interest, it'll be of interest, I think, to the majority of you, just because of the state of education that we find ourselves facing. And you know what I'm talking about, so don't go away. We'll come back on the other side with, I think, one of the most important interviews we've done in months.
Maverick News. The world is watching.
The information war is raging. Truth without integrity is worth nothing. Maverick News. Because those who have power and those who seek it must be held accountable.
The world is watching.
Join our family of truth seekers. Donate today and add your voice to the chorus of Maverick Knights. Donate at maverickdonations.com. Truth. Integrity. It's the Maverick way. Maverick News. The world is watching.
I'm back, and joining us live now is Jeanette Easton. Welcome to the program. It's so nice to meet you face to face here finally.
Thank you so much for having me, Rick. I love everything you're about and that you stand for, so it's a real honor to have you have me on here.
Well, I'm very excited to have this conversation tonight because education, it's one of the main concerns, I think, for people, I think especially on the conservative side of the political spectrum, people who value family values, people who value the traditional values that the country was founded on. And you know, people are always saying to me, I see no political solution, there's no hope. People are in a state of despair, and I keep saying, I don't agree. I think we're making progress, and there are people out there like yourself who are coming up with real solutions to the problems that you see facing us. You are part of this organization called Refound Ed. It's an education alternative. Can you just, rather than have me butcher the explanation, can you just explain to our viewers what is Refound Ed?
So, Refound Ed was a kind of just started to evolve naturally into an ecosystem. So, I had seen so my background personally is I have 20 plus years in social services and education. So when I seen them bringing in very toxic politically driven ideologies, I've seen them in closed ecosystems like group homes, mental health facilities, and knowing the outcome in these smaller ecosystems, I knew that everything was just one bad Bud Light commercial.
Yeah, I shouldn't even laugh, but yeah.
It's so it is going to seeing what was happening, a lot of educators were morally torn about we couldn't continue on this trajectory. A lot of us were driven by passion. You come out of college and university, I want to change the world. So everyone is driven by passion and heart. And then to be kind of pushed to take on or teach according to these policies that are just absolutely insane. We decided you try and fight the system, but then it gets to, and advocacy definitely has its place and should always have a place because it keeps the yang at bay. You always need that yin. But at the same time as well, we need to build, or else it's like Groundhog Day. You're kind of going, running that wheel over and over without, a different outcome. So we want a different outcome. So what I did was I had opened a micro school and had since sold it, but I approached a lot of people who started to build education options from learning pods to micro schools and private schools and other small supplemental options. And I was like, hey, who wants to work together? And next thing you know, we had a conference going, over 30 vendors. We were so blessed to have Dr. Byron Bridle, Bonnie Mallard, Rocco Galati, a lot of just Roshan Killian, a lot of big names that just genuinely care about children and wanted to support us. And hundreds of people showed up. So I was like, okay, there's a need, there's a want. We are actually the majority. So, which was really awesome. But looking at how everything was starting to evolve, I started diving into research. And something that you might want to look into as well, and your viewers, is there's something, they tell you their plans. And so they bring in the chaos, capitalize on the problems, and then capitalize on the solutions. But we want to make sure that the little guy, the community, is receiving the capital and not just the top tier. So Holon IQ, HOLON IQ, if you look at global learning landscape, they also have a global health landscape and a global climate change / geoengineering landscape. They actually, it's like a data funnel, I guess.
Sure, I can bring that up on the screen here so people can see what you're talking about.
So if you look at global learning landscape, and even if you scroll down to the learning section, it shows that they're anticipating a growth in the education sector of $10 trillion. And so considering they have all our tax dollars already and already have the majority of capital in the world, it would be nice to kind of direct the flow to the families, to the educators that are quite frankly paying to work. They've invested everything into building new schools, building out their communities. And some of them haven't been paid in a while because they're just so invested in the children. And we want to go beyond that survival and go into, a place of thriving.
So explain to me again, what is Holon IQ? What is this?
So this is, they communicate the plans of what they have for the future. So this is, if you're wondering what they have in store, this will give people information and direction of what they want to implement.
Who specifically is they?
I guess the WEF and the powers that
Gotcha.
be, and
Right.
so it kind of tells you where the information's coming from the references, and you'll start seeing the connections and the money trails, I guess, essentially.
Yep.
And so we want to, but the hierarchies are still the same. You have a top-down hierarchies, and it becomes only a few with a controlling interest, and we don't want that. We're actually proposing that we create, the grassroots creates digital solutions so that we stay like its own ecosystem, so that we can compete in that market, because if we don't invest in innovation as a grassroots, we will be left behind.
Right. Yeah.
And quite frankly, these educators deserve the investment. And we can create solutions that actually fund themselves, where families and educators are being paid passive and primary sources of income. And you can create systems that actually fund themselves just naturally through community. So you're actually flipping the hierarchy, where community dictates the terms, and you're co-creating, co-investing. So in our current systems, the top tier, they pocket pat each other. So they pay down. So say like a program, a big company wants to get into education. They pay the gatekeepers for entry. The little guy, the ones on the bottom that work the front line, don't see that funding. So we're proposing a series of affiliate programs, a series of like booking systems, education management systems, where the community that creates the solution, we're actually contributing to each other.
So let me just slow down here for just a moment.
Mm-hmm.
What you're saying is these globalists have effectively, through corporations and their network of nation states, have overlaid global control on our education system. And they're using their influence and their money to implement their agenda and indoctrinate our children to make sure that they are in compliance and in lockstep with their agenda as the next generation matures. You are in the process of setting up a parallel education system where it sounds like it will in some way be self-sustaining financially, in spite of the fact that these guys have really taken control of the money through the governments and the funding through the corporations, like the massive multinational corporations that I guess they invest. Is that what you're saying, in the education systems, which would be universities, colleges, and even right down into elementary schools, even though here in Canada we have a public education system that is supposed to be funded by the state or the government, but you're saying these corporations still have financial influence over what's going on?
Absolutely. They dictate the terms of which companies get their programs pushed. They very rarely do the smaller programs get access. And
Okay.
so we want to actually do the opposite, where instead of gatekeep, we open the doors. And naturally, the best of the best. So when you give funding to communities directly, to smaller entities, supporting local, there's more responsible money management. And because the community has that choice, they are watching, they are seeing where their money is going. And when the kids are happy, the parents are happy, they see the worth. But when the money is getting just cut from the top,
Yeah.
they don't see it, but they don't realize like it's a substantial amount that could really be invested. I think you said in another podcast there's an epidemic of mental health. And,
Oh, yes.
nail on the head. Because when you're being taken care of in terms of your mental health, they're naturally more receptive to learning. So, and what we're finding in these small education initiatives, they are being led by education-based entrepreneurs, the people that do, not just the people that teach. So even they're being a part of this process, learning that you can build anew, which is amazing, because no matter how things work out, kids will always be motivated by the fact that they could just rebuild and know that it's possible. Just kind of like a lot of people think, unions have always existed. I'm like, no, our parents did it. It wasn't like caveman unions and all these like acronyms and governing bodies and and teachers pay $5,000 to $10,000 a year. So they pay with their taxes and they pay through their paychecks. If we actually took those funds and invested into community, they could actually make money off that money, and they can choose where it's allocated, which means that it's nice to have that choice, because then
Okay, so let's slow down a little bit, because I think we're getting maybe just a little bit ahead of ourselves in a way that maybe people at home are having a little trouble following. Let's just take the little building blocks here, one step at a time. How exactly is this new parallel system being set up? Do you have schools that? Well, you must have schools of some kind being set up. So can you explain that?
So everyone is their own school. So we want a decentralized system. So every school is their own entity, their own small business. So think, if we compare it to what exists today, think about like the Amish community or the Mormon community or the Jewish communities. They have tidings, right? They contribute to a bigger community pot, and then they contribute to their local community pots so that they can stay afloat and function. And so we're proposing to adopt systems like that have been in operation, but they take care of their own. And so we're thinking, why don't we do it to scale? Well, every business still stays separate because a decentralized system is harder to control, which is better. But we come together to get certain perks, because if we work as a collective, we have more bargaining power.
Sure.
One example,
an education cooperative.
Exactly. So one way is we got 20% off of insurance. We got group health benefits. So we're garnering the perks that they want as a collective, and as the numbers swell, they can capitalize on those perks. But instead of just getting it taken from the back end of their paycheck, they just would have to upfront. So even the way we consume is going to change. Education is going to change on every level.
Okay, so you're having people are setting up small schools, private schools.
Yes.
In communities across, like cities across the country. And then they can join this education cooperative. And you have the benefits of having something that's very locally run and managed at the local level, truly the grassroots level, but now they're becoming part of a larger collective that gives them economies of scale to purchase things such as insurance, as you mentioned, and maybe even chalk for a chalkboard, right? Any of the inputs that they need for their business, you could be bulk purchasing, working together to get better economies of scale, better efficiencies. Fair enough. And I think even maybe share resources like supply teachers, textbooks, subscriptions to software. The list would go on and on, right?
You are a clever man. That is exactly what we're trying to do, because everybody has so much, they're so smart and have so much to bring to the table. Separately, together, we're getting resources. Like a friend's husband got us the benefits. Like another provider, they got us the insurance discount, and then they're meeting with other people And next thing you know, people are offering up services because they're so motivated to invest in kids because, well, it's kind of a no-brainer. They're our future, and we have to plant the seeds. Even if we don't see the shade, we still have to plant the seeds because they're our most precious resource, and they are being indoctrinated at the highest form. And so education also, for those who might be new to the kinds of schools, it's not only private schools. So what's emerged now is, so a learning pod is a 1:5, like 1:6 ratio, which is a tricky, sustainable thing. But for a special needs group, it's nice to have a smaller group, right? Because you get more attention. We do find a nice little sweet spot is the micro school, which is 2 or more learning pods. So you have like a 2:10 ratio. Because then, if you have to go to the bathroom, the apocalypse doesn't happen. It's good for safety reasons, and kids are just rascally, right? So it's kind of a nice to have. Older kids with a learning pod might be ideal. So it depends on the needs of the kids and the needs of whoever is, supporting the kids as well. And then you have private schools, and you have like uninspected private schools. So they're still registered, but they can take some bigger numbers. Our schools are also finding that a nice sweet spot for those numbers is like 8 to 10 kids. So you can still provide individual attention, but at the same time give them address their unique needs. And then you have inspected and more, where you get credentials. The whole credential system is also a lot of boo-boo. Like, for example, is like if you have a gifted child who's moving through the system, you can have like a 12-year-old graduating from university. If they have the intellectual acumen, they can move forward like any other gifted child. So
you have a greater degree of flexibility with a system like this than you do in some mass provide like public education, mass education system where everybody's kind of held at the same level, and you have to go through everything at exactly the same pace. It allows people to excel, allows students to excel and recognize exceptional talents or abilities, right? Is that fair?
Oh, yes, because we're not only addressing educators, we're also addressing creators. There's a lot of industry leaders. Like I was approached by an architect who wanted to do workshops for children about, the basic principles and foundations of architecture. So imagine learning that from an architect. There's someone we have a few engineers that want to help children build their own drones, who want to build their own cars that run it on different types of things. We have like different types of
fuel.
We have a lot of farmers that want to teach how to make your own like how to milk a goat or a cow, how to make your own cheese, taking care of animals, which they love. Connecting to nature, forest schools. And the beauty is homeschooling has blown up, but you could also do whatever you want. If you need to put your kid in 4 days, you can also on the 5th day, if you still need to work, pick a supplemental option where they're going to go learn coding or learn something specific from a professional that's a little bit higher level, that might be out of the comfort zone of the school or the parent. So you're just upskilling your kids and nothing, which is the outcome has been really cool. And so I do see us investing more when our kids are younger and actually less when they're older.
So you mentioned homeschooling kind of exploding and becoming more and more popular, right? Especially, I'm sure, since the pandemic and with all these issues like, I hate to say it out loud, but drag queen story time and all of these issues that for some parents it real concerns and legitimately so. You want your children to be raised the way you want them to be raised, not the way the state wants them to be raised. So for a lot of people, I can understand why they're pulling them out of the system. Maybe even for issues would like vaccinations be another issue that would be come into play here?
Absolutely. Some people, it's varying degrees of awakeness or we'll say awareness. Some people want some, but not all. Some see what's happening, but it's people should have the freedom to choose what's right for them, but people don't want it. And right now, actually in March, they're going to be sending out suspension letters, saying that it is mandatory and they're going to be suspended. And a lot of parents don't know their rights. Vaccine Choice Canada is amazing at communicating, a lot of the things that are happening in that regard, and Mama Bear's project too. And yeah, they just don't want to comply. And the sexualization of children, it's actually happening at every level, to the point where it's actually we should be concerned about morality, the epidemic of morality in general. I learned recently about something called sugar. Oh, yeah, that's us.
Yeah, there's your website.
So, and we're rebuilding. We are looking for investment to level up the tech side of things. So, anybody who has money to share and wants a return on the investment, it would be, it would definitely be a substantial return, because we understand that there's trust built, and it would be done with a lawyer, with all the T's crossed and I's dotted, and so like everything is put together and ready to roll.
So are these schools all going to be bricks and mortar schools, or are you going to have like some done out of homes, or will there be some online learning? How does all that work?
It's done with all of it. So we're going to have a combination of everything, and some educators are coming up with new curriculum options, new assessment options that are not standardized tests, just a new way, a new perspective to look at education that people may have not considered in the past. And an example of how well they're doing, we have one school that grew from 4 kids to 3 locations. They have won an award, Education Conference 2.0 in Las Vegas. We are going to be in a room with big thinkers in education. I asked her, I'm like, do they know what you're about and how? And she's like, yeah. But even in the US, they have the red states and the blue states. Even when you look at the Harvard education conferences, which I attended virtually as well, if you go and take a look, you'll see who's talking from the red states and the blue states. And you can tell there's a lot of divisiveness there too. So it's not. So there is both kind of perspectives, but I do think our perspective on like a neo-traditional approach. So skills of old, skills of new, and skills of the future. There's enough space for all of it.
And you did mention that you're into the digital age because you don't want to be left behind. So many people I speak to who are concerned about the way our government has been treating people, government overreach. They're worried about things like central bank digital currency, digital ID. So they're at a point in where they want to just reject anything digital. But running into the woods and living in a lean-to isn't maybe the best option in a modern society. You're sort of at that point removing yourself from society completely, and I think kind of moving backwards. So you're focused on making sure that the children are able to compete in a digital future.
Absolutely. And a lot of parents are concerned too about, well, where do we go from here? Even like as small children, they're very focused on academia, and so are we, don't get me wrong, but its application will be changed. And like an example of higher education is Dr. Byron Bridle and Bonnie Mallard, and I believe someone else, they're coming up with a science lab school, which I'm sure you'll be able to ask questions. Which is really awesome. Jordan Peterson is coming out with Peterson Academy, and his daughter, Michaela Peterson, $5,000 for a Bachelor of Arts. So, and a lot of industries are taking lead on educating at a higher level. So instead of learning from these universities where they're just spewing theory, 1/3 of those post-secondary entities will kind of survive. The rest are going to die out because the return on investment isn't there.
So is Jordan Peterson's school going to be part of your organization, or do you know yet?
That would be awesome. We're gonna put that into the universe. But it would be great to like just develop connections too, so that like we're not going to, our niche is going to be 0 to 18. We're focusing on the children, but we do want to create funnels into higher education options that align, because parents are going to say like, what's next? Where can my child go? And we want a plethora of options along with mentorships. Like think of how our parents came with $10 in their pockets, and they learn the skills in the job, and right now they have the most assets out of all the boomers have like almost a few trillion in assets based on, but our generation is
Right.
one of those things where they can come with nothing and establish that much. Why can't we I guess start from their point and work our way up as well? I think it's possible.
So one of the challenges, I'm sure, for parents who want to participate in this is that it's the same as it would be for anyone sending their children to a private school or even homeschooling. A portion of your taxes are taken whether you like it or not. Isn't that correct? And then still allocated to the public school system, whether your child attends or not. So it is going to cost, or will it cost, a little bit more for parents to send their children into a system that you're setting up.
So a price point for a learning pod to private school can range anywhere between $800 on the low end to $1,500. It depends on like how big their facility is, the amount of insurance, more people, more resources needed. So
that's what, per month?
Per month, yes.
Yeah.
So well, every flush, every wad of toilet paper costs
Right.
money. So unfortunately, the math has to math.
Yes.
And people need to understand that people can't live on empty either. And
Right.
so it's relearning financial literacy is a big thing, and understanding the compensation. So we did put out petitions for education funds. We did get a lot of pushback by, so those that are more affluent and can afford it, I understand that they wouldn't want money from the government. And I get that. But there are a lot of people who are struggling, and a lot of them are special needs. There are waiting lists for 2+ years for funding, and a lot of them are single parents, and they could use the resources. In my ideal world, if I could completely, it was up to me, I would have it so that they could allocate or choose if they invested in public school, private school, homeschooling, or invest in a charity of their choice, like the person's choice. That would be an ideal, so that the money follows the child, and then they're investing in their local communities, which will just push growth and encourage more growth. It would be awesome, but I don't know that it'll take, but it's tricky part, because if they do that, if they do give money, they could tie it into digital IDs. People are not wrong. They could tie it to, like, you have to participate in this element of society to get this. That's the carrot. So I understand people's reservations, but I would love to increase access to those that are more impoverished, so we can, improve the morale of all of society.
So what would you say, give me some of the main differences that are in place, or that people will experience. What's the main thing, or the main things that separates you from the public system?
Well, everybody brings all these unique skills. They're all aligned. They believe in freedom. They want to be creative. The parents have a voice. They can come and speak and share. They can participate as much or as little as they can, because some parents are very busy and have a lot of, they're choosing between providing financially and providing, the moral, just being there for their child. And
Right.
it's very, so they have to put their child somewhere. A lot of people are like, everyone should homeschool. I'm like, but that's not the reality of everyone. I have worked in shelters for single mothers. And so like that's not realistic for populations that are on the lower end of the socioeconomic spectrum. And we need to make it so that they can. So one example, I guess a more storytelling kind of example would be, like, I came from humble beginnings. My mom was a cleaning lady, and she worked for very affluent, she was a nanny and cleaning lady. She worked for very affluent people that had corporations, law firms, but they made her feel like part of the family. And so they would invite us to events. And my mom's, she has some social anxieties. She's nervous. She didn't speak English very well. And she would take us to these events that she was invited to. And I'm like, Mom, like, why suffer? Why take us if you're kind of nervous? And she goes, because I want to give you access to a life I can never give you. And it did make a difference, because like one person had their own business and brought me to trade shows where I was doing demonstrations. I would never have access to that had I stayed in, grew up in a rougher neighborhood. So those that grow up in a neighborhood, the government sets up these systems to keep them down. And we want to increase the access to them, because kids that are behavioral, kids that are at risk, which I've worked with a lot of, like gangs, teenage moms, like the worst of the worst, people said had no hope. The second that you invest your time and energy into them, when they actually get into nature, like inner city schools don't understand what it's like to be like farming and agriculture. But when you put them in that scenario, I've had some of the worst behaved kids just thrive, and kind of, they needed to get their hands dirty. They're high energy kids. They're wild. They're strong willed. But those are my favorite kids, because they were intelligent. They were strong. They would change the world. And we need to be able to open those doors for them.
Now, I used to run a business. Well, I still do run a business, but what I'm getting at is I had a qualified school teacher working with me in my business because she couldn't get a teaching job. So I don't know what the job market for teachers is like right now, but is the job market such that there's an abundance of teachers available to become involved in what you're doing?
So it's a catch-22. So teachers from the system are used to their golden handcuffs.
Okay.
So they're used to, their a certain price point. And, as a startup business, you can't always meet them where they're at right away. It's not that these people that are opening schools, it's not that they don't want to, it's just that they need to work up to it, because the economy is really tough right now. So unfortunately, they feel stuck. We have a lot of teachers on mental health leaves. So many. Any teacher that could retire, out. So we have shortages of teachers in the system. The alternative education sphere, it's still very new, so people aren't sure they're still it's a transition period. So we can find them. It's just, it is tricky because they also have kind of a minimum, I guess, cost per month that they were hoping to achieve. And also a lot of the ed tech companies are offering a lot of these new teachers more money. My friend's cousin, she was in teaching for 5 months. She was offered $70K and she was gone instantly. So they're getting poached. Anybody who's viable is getting poached. And then you have what's left over. So public schools are short on teachers. They have unqualified educators that are, I'm not saying the more I've seen really great educators that aren't fully educated, and I've seen really good ones that are fully educated. So it could go any direction. You have to be like, but we want those that are kind of have a knack for it, and have some degree of some frame, some foundation, because there are some skill sets that help. But once the public system, it's going to implode on itself, because you're going to have an increase in violence, because the children have bore witness to really bad bullying behaviors from adults for the last 3 to 4 years. The ripple effect I knew was going to catch up. So you have a lot of, and people can't take it anymore. They can't take the rebelliousness of the kids, and I don't blame their rebelliousness. And the teachers with the most grit and have the most capacity have exited and started their own schools because they have grit. So why not do things their way? Because they're capable, intelligent, and they have the heart for it. So it's it's just volatile across. It's like really hard across the board, right? You have a new emerging education ecosystem that is, finding its way. And then you have this old system that's imploding, but the straw will never not exist, the public system, but it's going to be reduced significantly. And my worry is that public school will be a sentence for the less fortunate, and which will continue to drive the gap. And so, and with a lot of immigrants coming, what happens when you have a lot of immigrants coming who are stuck in that, and then bringing in a universal basic income is a lot easier, because the top will naturally, take leadership roles and will be able to be above that. But we also want to be able to, there's a lot of great creativity and a lot of great souls that maybe grew up with less, but they're still very intelligent and capable. And it would be nice to kind of just increase that access. And if we give people choice of where they invest, everything will naturally evolve into something more beautiful. But I don't know that that's what they want.
So actually, the kids that attend will be in a more nurturing environment and even a safer environment overall.
Hands down. And if you look at our social media, and we're pretty much on all social medias, at Refound Education or at Refound Ed. On Instagram, I guess I have my biggest audience. Once you look at the videos, it is so heartwarming and so incredible, just to see them engaging in their learning activities, that you'll be so drawn to it. Your kids will be drawn to it. I guarantee if any parent were to show their children the images and the videos of what learning could be, it would be like fish to water. They would be so, and we have to pull away from, and tech, it has its place, but at the same time, we have to connect more to nature. Tech skills are very easy to acquire because it just is. So it's very important for our kids to be immersed in nature, immersed in that space where they can be creative. And parents are going to see that they're going to have opportunities to do so. And just learn real collaboration and real teamwork. And
how much influence will the government continue to have over your system? There are, I think, laws in place and standards that they will superimpose over what you're doing. They require you to meet certain standards. Tell me what those are.
So, yes, the Ontario curriculum, we exceed those standards, hands down. They see the flaws, and they have real applications that are incorporated in the alternative, more grassroots initiatives. And they see how to use math. The financial literacy it's more substantial. because the educators are doing it. Our system, like schools kill creativity, you know, that popular TED Talk. I forgot his name escapes me, but if you look up schools kill creativity, it doesn't only happen only in the children, it happens in the educators and adults as well. And a lot of these educators started with so much creativity, so much they had these wings, they wanted to fly, and next thing you know, they get clipped. They're like pigeons under under a bridge. It's and that's not, you know, a growth place. And once I learned, because I went into it, I actually originally never wanted to be a teacher. I was kicked out of high school, and I became a college professor for a short time too. That's how I learned the credentialing system was not what I thought it was. And I learned about a lot of the loopholes with the Ontario curriculum, I started teaching friends, and I got in trouble actually because it would cut into their funding once I taught them how to cut the red tape. And actually, when I was working in high schools with a lot of the rascally kids, I had kids coming from other schools seeking me out. And we're talking about the naughty kids, the ones that are saying, oh, you're not going to amount to anything. You don't care about your future. You don't want to be successful. These kids are taking multiple buses from the roughest of areas saying, Miss, I heard you know what's up. I need your help. And so when people tell me kids aren't motivated, everyone's motivated to be successful. That is such a crock, and it's an easy way out. Because what are we communicating to parents? Like, people wonder why parents are upset or why educators, you're going up to parents and telling them that there's no hope for their children. What kind of response are you going to expect in return? You're going to these children and saying, oh, you're not going to succeed in life.
And from what I'm seeing on the website, a big focus for you is building character, building self-esteem, helping to create the leaders of tomorrow.
Yes, and we're going to have a gap. So like our generation, we have a little bit more grit, and we're a little bit more, you know, we don't mind ruffling some feathers. But the next generation, they're younger. They don't have the confidence to say, they might be rebellious, but it's more of an uncontrolled rebellion where we have more life experience, so we understand how to harness our rebellious nature, where they're more just wild, in the wild, which I love. Because they are motivated, they need guidance. They wouldn't have enough intellectual ability to set up these systems, but they are going to take our place. So once we set up these ecosystems and put the infrastructure, like every industry has infrastructure, right? So once we set up the infrastructure, we can mentor the next generation. They're going to see it's possible. And that was one of the responses at the conference. We did another conference with Julie Panesi. She was amazing. And we had a lot of young teachers come up to us and say, I didn't know that this was possible. And I'm like, if our parents can get off the boat and build unions, why on earth can we recreate systems? Why can't we everything is man-made. We can recreate anything we want. Absolutely anything.
Sure.
And once we're a large enough group, we can push, because they will push governance. They will try and push their version of a curriculum. But
when you say that, you're talking about what, government?
Government, the powers that be. And not to say there shouldn't be safety protocols and that kind of thing. I'm not saying that because I am aware of the other side of society, having worked with, the police and child protection and stuff. So I know how there's a lot of bad apples out there. But at the same time, we can also, as a group, as a collective of intelligent people, push back. And then if we group with other groups across industry that are aligned, across with the homeschooling group, even if we're separate entities, if they try and push for too much governance, we can come together as a collective and advocate together. Because if we are the majority, Like HSLDA, they're an amazing entity. They've been around for decades.
What is HSLDA? What's that?
That's the
Homeschooling.
Homeschool Legal Defense Association. And so they support parents that want to homeschool. And they have increased their numbers. They're in Canada and the US, but there's other homeschooling groups that are, religiously specific, but they all come together, the homeschoolers. And when they try and superimpose policies, they have lawyers that come together and kind of try and put them in check and make sure that the policies are working in favor of the homeschoolers, because they found that homeschoolers actually exceed post-secondary expectations. Like, the results are there, the research is there, and because they have been more established, they do have like research that supports all the things that they've been saying.
So what was it that started all this? Was it the pandemic, or was this beginning to form even before that?
Unschooling was always popular. I like 10 years ago, I had a friend who started Disrupt HR. So she was super young. She just got together with other people and said, "Hey, we're doing a conference." I'm like, "You can do that? Okay, let's see where this goes." So she got a whole bunch of industry leaders in across various, like a lot of tech industries, and HR professionals, and they were sharing innovation. So I was voted in to speak about bridging the gap between education and industry. And so all these industry leaders are like, "I love what you're saying. I love what you're talking about. We have to unschool and unteach all our new employees and then reteach and they have to relearn everything. So it just makes sense." I brought my ideas to the school board, all gung-ho at the time. Like, "Hey guys, I have some great ideas." And of course I was shot down faster than I could speak. So clearly I was in the wrong room, and it's been deteriorating ever since. And then of course with the pandemic, it was they want to create chaos because they wanted to create systematic change, and they wanted to privatize, but they want to do things to their benefit. And I'm saying, let's flip that script. And there's a lot of us that are saying it, and say, let's make sure it works to our benefit and make sure the chips lie.
and our system is set up in a way that does allow you to pull out of it and create your own, to teach your kids the way you want to teach them. And what you're doing here really is counteracting globalism with like the absolute, like true grassroots, a true grassroots response to that.
Absolutely. And we have a virtual education summit. You can see it on Eventbrite, and you can see it on our website. The tickets are free, but you will get a sense of the caliber of educators that we have that are building, and you are going to be very impressed. I promise.
So when is that event?
It is March 5th to 9th.
Okay. Is there a web page I can put up on the screen to show people?
Yeah, you can put up, you can bring up the refounded.ca. Just go to listings.
Okay. And there's listings there.
Yep, and it's also on Eventbrite. So if you scroll down, I'll keep scrolling. Oh, page 2. So hopefully with investment, we can make it a lot more streamlined. Oh, I guess you have to go under events.
And where do I find events?
So events. Just go to, like right here on the all listings, go to social and events.
Got it. Okay.
You can also look it up. There it is. So you can also look it up on Eventbrite.
Okay.
And everything will become a lot more streamlined. Tech requires a lot of investment to function in a way that is seamless. And that's what we're up against too, because they have so much capital and they make it so convenient, where when you're working from a grassroots level, you have to get to your goal, you have a few more rungs up the ladder to climb. So But stay tuned, because we are like trains on a track. We are full steam ahead, and we are not giving up. And we know we've been consistent for years, since the beginning. And this is just too important to not be committed.
Now, you mentioned the province of Ontario here in Canada, and we do have a lot of viewers in the U.S. as well. But this isn't just restricted to Ontario. This will, you hope, expand across the country. Is that correct?
Yes. So we want to ideally be across Canada to start. We want to make sure that we have a strong foundation. We have had some education initiatives in the U.S. saying to come down there. My husband's American. He would love that. But he came from California, but I don't think the California he left is the California that's there anymore. But it's not off the table, but I also want to caution about being too widespread, because it's our children. And so we want to make sure that we help at home first.
Sure.
And make sure we have a strong foundation and safety protocols and things that kind of, so once that tech investment is there, we can make sure that we have just the perfect people in place to really elevate things. And like HSLDAs in Canada and the US, which they are fantastic. And so I think getting too large is, I don't know if we would stay in control. I actually like the idea of multiple people, because you have to collaborate. Once you have too much of a monopoly, I don't know if you ever watched Mr. Robot.
No, I don't.
No? But it's one of those, you have to, monopolies aren't great. I like that there's multiple players in the game, because then it just stays more decentralized. So we are going to work with Canada first. Once we're there, we'll see where things go. I don't think we need to have all the answers right away.
But what I'm getting at is it's not just Ontario. I think you're primarily in Ontario now, but you already have a plan to expand into all the other provinces. What about, and maybe the territories? I don't know.
Yes, we have some contacts, of course, like Alberta's, we have more contacts in Alberta. BC, very limited, but we have to build reputations with community leaders and go from there. And some provinces are smaller populations and they have larger homeschool networks. So it depends on, so there'll be more options in some provinces based on population growth and density, and less in other options. So it would be nice to be everywhere across Canada. And you know what, a funny thing is, we have a lot of people in Canada aren't really loving Canada right now. So we have a lot of people fleeing to Costa Rica, or they want to be snowbirds before they retire. And they just kind of expanding their wings, and some are opening jungle schools. And so they actually have roots in Canada, and then they're expanding into other parts, which I think could be kind of cool. I'm not sure where that's going to go. But when you have a trusted kind of home base, and who kind of think about a lot of religious groups do missions where they go to different places. And I think it would be really cool to kind of have some trusted locals that we can do, I guess, an exchange. We have someone in Mexico who's building, so I don't think he's ready to announce anything yet. But yeah, we could have some pretty interesting options as we evolve. And
that is pretty interesting. So are there prerequisites for the students to enroll, or how will you just, you can only take so many kids, so how would you end up deciding, or can you just accommodate as many kids that come forward?
Well, all the schools can accommodate lots of, some more, some less, because every school is separate. So some can accommodate more, some can accommodate less. Depends on how large or how small. Some have rent business spaces, or larger spaces, or have large scale homesteads. that can accommodate more kids and some don't. So I do encourage parents to take a look. I do have a massive list. Not everybody's registered, but I do have a larger list. So if there are parents that don't see a lot of options in your area, please email info@refound, refounded.ca, and I can send a custom list until we influx. Like, we have to get people to make sure everyone's signed up, and that takes time to grow any kind of online platform.
info@refounded.ca. Yep. I'll put it up on the screen for people so you can email Jeanette at info@refounded.ca. I'm not sure where else to go from here. If someone wants to set up a school, can anybody do that, or do you have to be a teacher, or could it be a business person that oversees it but brings teachers in, or how would all of that work? Are there regulations in place? I'm curious.
So that is a fantastic question. Yes, we can help you do that. We do classes. If you go on to my Instagram, I have a few coaching options, and we have other educators as well that can teach you coaching. We have people who have published books that can teach you how to publish books and curriculum. We have people that can teach you how to open a private school, open a daycare, anything that you need to move forward on an idea. We know people who are very thorough with their knowledge of regulations, with access to resources, whatever they may be. Between all of us, we have it's just this network that keeps growing of resources. So we do offer classes. I'm not going to give people advice here openly, but if you are interested, but for those thinking that it is cheaper to open your own learning pod and have your own kids than it is to pay someone else, I guarantee you it is cheaper to pay someone else than to take it on yourself, because the burden of cost then falls on you, and sometimes it does fluctuate, and there's more fluctuation because the economy is shite. So it's one of those, parents want this.
That's a very academic term.
It is very academic, right? But a lot of parents, you know what, they were told, a lot of people asked, like, if you were given the money, they said we would be gone immediately. So
Yeah.
it's incredible, but nothing is off the table. You can build anything. And I am so stoked of what's to come. It's just going to take a while to get there. One example too, if you look at, like, Canva is very popular right now. They've been around for 10 years. So they've been streamlining their process for the last decade, and now they are popular. So it will take time to build, or kind of like Airbnb. It was two brothers in a renting their basement, and then created a website. We're like the brothers in the basement, right? Grassroots.
Yeah.
And then after some investment and stuff, they started to evolve. So I want everybody to be patient with the evolution of everything, because everything is going to change. Like, from media, from Rick's thing, to education, to healthcare. Healthcare is evolving in ways that are quite magical. And yeah, we have the resources, or know people with the resources that can help you in any way.
Very cool. So how many schools do you have right now?
So
or pods, or, can you quantify this for me?
So we have, it's hard to quantify. There are literally thousands of options that have started to emerge, because not only the freedom that's investing in private, it's also the other side has their private entities. And so people, right now we have like about 200, but it will grow. I know it'll grow, because we've been getting on people's radar. Plus, I'm very shadow banned. Anytime I try and upload anything, because I make reference, like, to facts and to articles and to, it takes me like 5 hours to upload like a 10-minute video. So I should probably migrate to Rumble, I guess, so that I can just get some of the truth out there.
Yeah.
But I also have 2 little ones, and so people have told me to do a podcast, but one thing at a time, I think, is fair.
Well, is there anything else you'd like to add or think that I might be missing?
No, so please just be sure to follow us on social media, give likes, follow the the schools, offer yourself up. Like you don't only have to contribute financially. You can contribute by sharing. You can contribute by volunteering at one of your local alternative schools, by sharing your skill sets. If you're a grandparent, a parent, and you just want to teach or develop a relationship, it's all so important. If you have like a few bucks, contribute. If you have donations, contribute. Any contributions are welcome and warmly received, because these educators are incredible, and I really want people to bear witness and share with your friends and families that so they can start to know that anything's possible.
And you can start by sharing this video just to spread the word, and contact Jeanette if you have questions at info@Refound Ed or refounded.ca, however you choose to pronounce it. Obviously, it's like Refound Education, I think is what you're getting at there. So info@refounded.ca, and that will go right to Jeanette, and she'll answer any questions that you have. If you have kids that you want to get involved in the new system, or if you have a community group, I don't know, whatever. You have the questions, she has the answers. I'm just a middleman. And I'm so grateful for you coming on here tonight, Jeanette, to explain all of this. I'm also grateful for your efforts, because I see this as very positive, it's constructive, it's a solution. This is exactly the kind of thing that people have talked about, but very few people ever actually take action, and that's what you've done. And you're showing people that not only is there hope, there can be affluence, prosperity, success, a bright future ahead. All you have to do is create it.
Absolutely, and just believe and have some fearless faith in yourself and others.
That's right. That's right. Jeanette, thank you very much. Jeanette Easton, everybody.
Thank you so much, Rick. I'm really honored.
No, my privilege. Thank you very, very much. We'll be right back, folks, on the other side of this.
The New World Order. Government overreach. The Great Reset. Mainstream media lies. Now more than ever, independent voices are needed. Donate now at freedomreporters.com. That's freedomreporters.com. Maverick News. The antivirus program for your mind.
Okay, everybody. Thank you very much to Jeanette for dropping in and sharing that story with us tonight. We're going to move on and start talking about the news of the day. And as I told you at the beginning of the newscast, we have a lot to share with you tonight. Putin warning us that there, is the potential for an actual nuclear conflict if the West sends troops into Ukraine. We'll show you that. And Pierre Poilievre really going hard on Justin Trudeau and the Liberal NDP coalition government on this Winnipeg BioLab security breach, which tonight I would say should be probably the top story in the country, and yet mainstream media not really giving it very much attention at all. But we will when we come back.
Maverick News. The world is watching.
Another day, another scandal for Justin Trudeau and the governing Liberals. Yesterday we told you about these documents that have finally, after years, they've been released, giving us insight into what really happened, what the story behind the scenes was, with these two scientists that were fired back in 2019. Well, they weren't fired in 2019. I think it was almost a year and a bit later when they were actually fired. But when these concerns about these two scientists at this Winnipeg BioLab first surfaced. So now these documents have come out. We know more about it. And the way it was described yesterday by Canada's health minister, who took the lead at the news conference on this as those documents were provided to the public for the very first time, is that he said that it wasn't so much that chose his words very carefully, very, very carefully, and he danced around the idea that biological samples or information might have been stolen, or that anything had been stolen and had then been taken to other countries. Instead, it appears, or it appeared yesterday from what he was telling us, Minister Holland, was that the whole thing was really a concern about these two scientists, husband and wife, working out of this Winnipeg BioLab, who had taken additional work from entities that connected them directly to foreign governments. Specifically, I think what we're talking about here is China. And in addition to that, the other security concern here is that people from China, from other foreign governments, were allowed access to the BioLab facility, as well as some of the maybe even computer systems. And I don't know, possibly even some of the specimens. Not really clear. But today in the House of Commons, it was the issue that kicked off question period. We'll go to the House of Commons now, show you what went down there today. And then we're going to go to a news conference with Pierre Poilievre, leader of the Conservative Party of Canada, who really is going hard on Justin Trudeau. So let's pick it up at the beginning here. Question period.
The honourable member from Wellington, Halton Hill.
This is all like bioweapon stuff.
Mr. Speaker, not only did the government neglect national security, not only did they cover up things, they continue to skirt responsibility. Yesterday, the Minister of Health said, no high officials involved in the microbiology lab will be held responsible. If there's no one responsible, who within the cabinet will know who is responsible? The Honourable Minister of Health. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. At the beginning, it's important to say that health agencies are independent, particularly in terms of national security. And it's our government that created a process to make sure that all the information is available. And it's really important for two Canadian citizens who were very well known as scientists, did bad things like this, and there is an investigation underway with the RCMP. And this is very important, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member from Wellington, Halton Hills.
Mr. Speaker, the Canada-China Committee in 2019 could have done exactly the same job as the ad hoc committee did, and we could have had the documents 3 years ago. The CSIS assessments released yesterday make it clear the PRC is and was actively recruiting top Canadian scientists to plunder Canada's research and intellectual property. The assessments also make clear that the PRC wants to weaponize this civilian research for military purposes against us and our allies. Knowing what we know now, will the government halt all collaboration between the Winnipeg National Microbiology Laboratory and any entities and individuals in the People's Republic of China?
The Honourable Minister for Health.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. And I want to say that an attack on our national security by foreign nations, be it China or Russia, represents an attack on democracy and represents a direct attack on every member of this House. And that I share his outrage that China or any country would attempt to interfere in our process. The Public Health Agency, which is one of the most respected agencies in the world, hired 2 Canadian citizens who are eminent and well-known scientists in Canada who lied. It is the Public Health Agency that discovered that. It is the Public Health Agency that fired them, and that's why there's now an RCMP investigation about their actions.
The Honourable Member from Wellington, Halton Hills.
The documents, Mr. Speaker, reveal a shocking disregard for Canada's national security. They reveal a government that is completely asleep at the switch on national security and the machinery of government. They reveal government employees collaborating with Beijing's government and with the biological weapons unit of the People's Liberation Army. Equally shocking are the health minister's comments. He said yesterday there was no evidence of actual breaches at the lab and no sensitive information actually left the country. The documents say otherwise. Does the minister stand by those comments?
The Honourable Minister of Health.
Mr. Speaker, the 2 Canadian scientists in question were well known for their work in virology and had spent their time working on health treatments for those that were suffering from viruses. They are collaboration. There is absolutely no evidence of the thing that the member opposite is suggesting, and I do not think that it is at all appropriate to suggest that they were involved with weaponization or things of this nature. They have all the documents, they can see all the information. We have waived all the normal considerations, not only of national security, Mr. Speaker, but of employee relationships that normally are kept confidential. It was our government that did that. That's why they have this information.
The Honourable Member from Cumberland, Colchester.
Speaker, scientists working with Ebola at Canada's only level 4 lab collaborated with the People's Republic of China Army Major General. Sadly, this story does not end there. Dr. Chu was able to gain access to the lab for students from China, and it gets worse. A scientist from the Academy of Military Medical Sciences, the research arm of the PLA, known to work on biology-enabled warfare. How did so many citizens from a hostile superpower gain access to Canada's top lab? Is it because the Prime Minister admires China's basic dictatorship?
The Honourable Minister of Health.
Some will attempt in national security concerns to play partisan games. I think that's unfortunate. And let me just give an example. With respect to Ebola, the exchange of Ebola in 2019 was done in the context of trying to work with China and other countries on finding solutions to Ebola, which exists in so many different parts of the country. At that moment in time in 2019, the relationship with China was in a different place. The information that was shared was through legitimate channels. It has nothing to do with this issue. It was absolutely known and handled with complete control. I think it's very, very important to not mischaracterize national security for partisan interests.
I'd like to remind all members to ensure that they don't use language which would be unparliamentary directed at any of their colleagues. The Honourable Member from Cumberland, Colchester.
Speaker, that minister's comments are reckless and untrue. Before March 31st, 2019, the PRC did not have a containment level 4 lab. How can I be so specific about the date? This is the date on which a scientist at Canada's top lab, the National Microbiology Lab, shipped dangerous pathogens, including Ebola virus, to the Wuhan Institute of Virology. This scientist had a history of visiting and collaborating with the PLA since 2016. When did the Minister of Health and the Prime Minister know about the espionage and blatant violation of our sovereignty, and when did they decide to cover it up?
Here. The Honourable Minister of Health.
The exact opposite of a cover-up occurred. It's actually this government that created the process that released these documents. So they actually refused to participate in this process. The second thing that I will say, Mr. Speaker, with respect to our national security interests, that it is essential when we're dealing with national security to recognize two things. That the party opposite is saying that they would support a partisan interference in the Public Health Agency of Canada, that if they were in government, they would see it as acceptable for political interference into that process. No, it's at an an arm's length, and rightfully it is at an arm's length. They are the ones that identified these Canadian citizens, these eminent scientists, were lying, and they took action.
Order.
Okay. So that was what was going on in the House today. Now, Pierre Poilievre, leader of the Conservative Party of Canada, he's really zeroed in on this. What we're talking about here is not only a security breach, but something that could have the kind of impact on the world that the pandemic had. Maybe it already has, for all we know. We're talking about a BioLab with dangerous viruses. And the possibility here that specimens may have actually been removed. Maybe technology, information obtained by a rival superpower in the world, the People's Republic of China. We just came through a pandemic with evidence suggesting that that the pandemic, well, we know the pandemic originated in China, in Wuhan. It came from there. Now we're seeing connections between this lab and the PRC, and we've known about this for some time, but now we have more details. I've had phone calls from people today, just livid. And yet the mainstream media, barely mentioning this today. Hardly a peep. Certainly not the top story. But what's more important than a possible security breach at a facility that has deadly viruses contained there? What's more important than biotechnology research that could be used to potentially create a bioweapon, possibly being stolen and compromised? That is a national security issue. That's a world security issue. Pierre Poilievre knows it. And this is very likely to be another major issue heading into what could be an election year. Let's go to the news conference now with Pierre Poilievre, leader of the PPC. One moment. Getting it set up here for you. And one moment, he's getting through the French. Almost into the English. He always starts with French. Here we go. I think he's going to go to English here now. Pierre Poilievre.
Knew that Justin Trudeau was not worth the cost, the crime, the corruption, and the cover-up. But now we know that he cannot protect our people or our country. We just received these documents that Trudeau has been covering up for years. Documents related to a massive security breach at the Trudeau government's most sensitive laboratory, where the most dangerous viruses and pathogens are studied and handled. We have learned that the Trudeau government's head of pathogens was collaborating with members of Beijing's People's Liberation Army who are responsible for bioweapons and bioterrorism. We know now that a People's Liberation Army official was able to gain personal access, walk in the door, look at computers, and have access to all of our most important virological secrets. Let me, if you think any of this is hyperbole, read the report yourself. This is from government documents, the Trudeau government's own documents. It says here on page 142, Winnipeg Lab scientist Dr. Chu is head of the Special Pathogens Unit, the top person in that job. According to documents on page 242, quote, represents a serious and credible danger to the Government of Canada as a whole, and in particular at facilities considered high security due to the potential for theft of dangerous materials attractive to terrorists and foreign entities that conduct espionage to infiltrate and damage the economic security of Canada, end quote. It states further on page 239, investigators assess that Dr. Chu communicated with foreign entities during her trips to China. The evidence obtained from interviews and from information collected from the electronic content of her devices reveal that this is indeed the case. As a subject matter expert with access to sensitive information and dangerous materials, Dr. Chu presents a realistic and credible threat to Canada's economic security when conducting repeated and clandestine meetings with foreign entities, end quote. Then it says Dr. Chu conducted joint research with the Major General Chen Wei of the People's Liberation Army, who, according to page 236, is a noted top virologist at the Academy of Military Medical Sciences and is China's chief biological defense expert engaged in research related to biosafety, biodefense, and bioterrorism. Bioterrorism, end quote. These are documents. This is right out of the government's own documents. Trudeau, what did he do when he found out about this? Did he immediately inform Canadians of the breach? Did he fire anybody? No, no one was fired. Did he call an inquiry to get to the bottom of it? No, he didn't do that either. Instead, he covered it all up. He defied 4 parliamentary orders to release these documents. When the Speaker tried to get them, he sued the Speaker to cover this up. He said it was all for national security, but now we know from a committee composed of 4 members of Parliament, including 1 Liberal, and 3 judges, and I quote, the information appears to be mostly about protecting the organization from embarrassment for failures in policy and implementation, not legitimate national security concerns, and its release is essential to hold the government to account. In other words, there was no national security reason why we couldn't have had this before. It was only because Trudeau didn't want the embarrassment before an election. So what did he do then? He collaborated, knowing this, he collaborated with Beijing to buy a vaccine for COVID. Could you imagine if the deal that Trudeau wanted to sign with Beijing had gone ahead and we had procured China-made vaccines after learning this information? That's what was in this guy's head. And if you think for a minute, because I know there'll be all kinds of excuses, well, he's not responsible and how could he possibly take ownership of what happens in his government? Let me quote him. He has a document called Open an Account.
Okay, we'll be back right after this message, and we'll continue with the news conference.
Feel the vibrations. Our quest continues. The truth is out there. We are Mavericks.
As the telephone rings, we are called back to Ottawa, where the news conference with Pierre Poilievre continues now. Here we go.
After learning this information, that's what was in this guy's head. And if you think for a minute, because I know there'll be all kinds of excuses, well, he's not responsible and how could he possibly take ownership of what happens in his government? Let me quote him. He has a document called Open and Accountable Government. And I quote, as head of government, the Prime Minister has special responsibilities for national security, end quote. It's his responsibility. This is his government's lab. It's not a random university lab. It's the top lab for the Prime Minister's public health agency. and he is exclusively responsible for the machinery of government as Prime Minister of the country. So this is on Justin Trudeau. I will add one last thing. Not only did he cover it up, not only did he try to get a vaccine from China after knowing this, he called a snap election to make sure that the voting would happen before this came out. What happened in that election? Beijing interfered to help him win it. This is a man who says he admires China's basic communist dictatorship. We cannot trust Justin Trudeau to keep our people and its country safe. We need a strong, conservative, common sense government that will root out foreign interference, protect our critical secrets and our medical research, and stand on guard for our country to keep our people and our nation safe. Thank you.
On ArriveCan, there is a report by CT.
And now on to ArriveCan, of the other scandal that's front and center.
$1 million for ArriveCan. He is still employed by the Department of National Defense. What does that say to you?
It says to me that there's no accountability. Now that we know this individual should be immediately fired, and there should be an immediate police investigation of his conduct and that of the company with which he's associated, and a broader inquiry within the public service about how this contracting was allowed to go on for so long.
On the Winnipeg lab, do you think the National Microbiology Lab infectious disease researchers should be allowed to do any collaborations with China at this point?
No.
Why?
Because we know that in this instance that our highest placed, most sensitive lab was infiltrated by people who collaborated with the People's Liberation Army, who did not reveal any of their ongoing partnerships with the regime in Beijing, and who transferred materials from our most critical lab containing our most dangerous viruses over to Beijing and worked in collaboration with the Wuhan lab. So I don't think this is the kind of collaboration we want. We should be collaborating with like-minded democracies that we can trust, not those that want to attack our interests.
Do you use pharmacare?
So is Mr. Paul...
Okay. So this is, again, an issue that is definitely going to be a hot-button issue heading into the next federal election, and that could come sometime this year. Has to happen at the latest in early 2025. So we'll stay tuned on this one. This one, super important. We're talking about public safety, public health, life, and death.
The information war is raging. Truth without integrity is worth nothing. Maverick News. Because those who have power and those who seek it must be held accountable.
The world is watching.
Join our family of truth seekers. Donate today and add your voice to the chorus of Maverick Knights. Donate at maverickdonations.com. Truth. Integrity. It's the Maverick way. Maverick News. The world is watching.
All right. So, tonight as well, we have... Well, let me just get this set up here. We have Vladimir Putin in his State of the Union address sending a very clear message to the West. Send in troops to Ukraine, and you're running a real risk of a nuclear conflict. Very strong words, not mincing his words at all. Vladimir Putin laying it on the line tonight, in his address. So let me
военных
bring this up
контингентов.
for you.
Но мы помним судьбу тех, кто направлял когда-то свои контингенты на территорию нашей страны. Но теперь последствия для возможных интервентов будут гораздо более трагичны. Они тоже есть оружие, да знают об этом. Сейчас только я сказал. Тоже есть оружие.
So I assume you're seeing that. And I'm sorry, I just lost control of my tabs here while that was running. Let me re-cue it here for you. Let me bring that back up. Hang on. Here we go. Okay, I'm going to re-cue it. And for those just listening on our audio podcast, I'll read the subtitles so that you understand what is being said by Vladimir Putin. He says, they are talking about the possibility of sending NATO military contingents to Ukraine. He says, but we remember the fate of those who once sent their contingents to our country.
Но мы помним судьбу тех, кто направлял когда-то свои контингенты на территорию нашей страны. Но теперь
But now the consequences for possible interventionists will be much more tragic.
Последствия для возможных интервентов будут гораздо более трагичны. Они тоже есть оружие.
We also have weapons, they know about this. And as I just said, we also have weapons that can hit targets in their territory. And they should understand that what they are doing now, trying to scare the whole world,
весь мир, что все это
it does risk a conflict with nuclear weapons,
конфликтом с использованием ядерного оружия, а значит уничтожением
which means the
цивилизации.
destruction of civilization.
А ничего этого не понимают?
Don't they understand this, or what? Very concerning words. It shows you how close we really are. And that's not drama. That's not fear-mongering. That's the reality that we are facing right now. And I don't think that, in general, the public is aware of the gravity of the situation. And this is all playing out against a backdrop of geopolitics, information warfare, a Tucker Carlson interview with Vladimir Putin going viral online, becoming one of the most significant political interviews of our time, maybe one of the most significant of all time in all of human history. How significant that ends up being will depend on how all of this plays out. Carlson, appearing on the Lex Fridman podcast, said something that really actually surprised me. Asked about Putin referring to the denazification effort in Ukraine. Carlson's response to that question, very surprising to me. Quite critical, actually, of Putin's use of that term. Let me bring this up and I'll show you. Here we go. This is the clip.
What do you think of Putin saying that justification for continuing the war is denazification?
I thought it was one of the dumbest things I'd ever heard. I didn't even understand what it meant. Denazification?
It literally means what it sounds like.
You know, I have a lot of thoughts on this. I hate that whole conversation because it's not real. It's just ad hominem. It's a way of associating someone with an evil regime that doesn't exist anymore.
What do you think of?
See, I sort of agree with that because I think these old labels of communist, fascist, Nazi, they don't really quite mean what they used to because people are aware of what the cliches are. A lot of people who are communists or a lot of people who are Nazis don't call themselves that. They don't use the symbols. So people don't recognize what they really are. They misrepresent themselves. They even mask or cloak their true intentions with revised rhetoric, changes in the words that they use, but the overall messaging remains the same. It's just disguised so people get sucked down and immersed into the ideology without realizing what it is they're being indoctrinated into. And Carlson's reference, or I guess even confusion about the use of the phrase denazification, I think is totally understandable. In Ukraine, you do have pockets of what are very obviously Nazis within the military, and they do have real influence over what is going on over there. We've shown you that. So there's no question that that does exist, as it does in many countries around the world, in a very pronounced way, I think, in Ukraine, especially right now during this war. But I still tend to agree with what Tucker Carlson just said there. Denazification, what does it really mean? It's like a cliche, because it's like what was the phrase? I believe it was Reagan who said, if communism comes to America today or now, it would come in the form of liberalism. You see, that's exactly what we're talking about here, because so many people view communism or fascism or Nazism or even other certain political ideologies in such a negative way. People who embrace those ideologies don't come right out and say, oh yeah, I'm a Nazi. No. No, they mask it. They hide it. Until the time comes, and I can say after October 7th, some of those masks have been coming off, and some of the problems that have been running deep as an undercurrent throughout our society are now beginning to, well, they're being exposed. There's no question about that. But I thought his response still surprised me, though, because overall, I think that while he was over there, it was almost like watching a, travel show promoting Russia. He said so many positive things about Russia, nothing very critical at all that I saw. So to hear that really did surprise me. You know what else surprises me? All this talk about possibly sending troops, Western troops, into Ukraine. In fact, Canada tonight in this Toronto Star article, and I think this is sort of semi-exclusive because the headline is the result and the story is the result of an interview that was done with Canada's Defence Minister Bill Blair by editors and reporters at the Toronto Star. They're saying tonight that under the right conditions, here's the headline, under the right conditions, Canada open to sending non-combat troops to Ukraine, Defense Minister Bill Blair says. Well, sending in non-combat troops easily escalates into we're sending combat troops. It's just further escalation. It says here, Canada is open to sending a limited number of military personnel to train Ukrainian troops within Ukraine, so long as such an operation took place far from the front lines of the war with Russia in a clear non-combat role. Defense Minister Bill Blair says, well, we've already been heavily involved in training troops, or at least to the degree that our limited Canadian finances will permit. And this does refer to this interview that Bill Blair did with the Toronto Star. Talks about the security summit that he attended alongside Canada's NATO allies, where French President Emmanuel Macron floated the prospect of sending troops into Ukraine. which resulted in a series of statements from various Western allies, including Canada, who shot that idea down, at least shooting down the idea of sending in combat soldiers. But tonight, Bill Blair saying maybe non-combat soldiers, but it's only a very short step from there, isn't it, folks, to putting soldiers into combat roles? It's a progression, an escalation. And even though, some of the pundits continue to say that this whole war is going to be over very quickly, within days, maybe, or even a couple of weeks or months or whatever, even though as Ukraine loses ground, I think they're holding on, and funding will come. If the funding comes before Ukraine falls as a country, I think we're in for a very prolonged battle, at least another 6 months, maybe a year. And if there's funding beyond that, it'll continue beyond that. But at some point, I think that they will be forced to come for the sons and daughters in the West, your sons and daughters, our sons and daughters, because the casualties are mounting. Now, what are the real numbers? We've talked about that. I don't know. I'm not really certain. I've heard a wide range of numbers. The reality is, there's no way to know for sure at this point. We will need to wait. A lot of these numbers, I think, have been exaggerated on one side, downplayed a lot, anywhere from like 30, 40,000 casualties, which is what the Ukrainians claimed the other day, to 400,000, which I did hear Colonel McGregor make reference to. I think he's even up higher than that now. And those numbers don't seem to jive when I look at the actual numbers, and when I dig into the size of the Ukrainian military force, maybe it's true, and if that's true, then yeah, this whole thing is pretty much over with. But we see the West, Justin Trudeau stepping up, lining up with more funding, another $3 billion just over the weekend for Ukraine. So the funding hasn't stopped. And of course, we know that there is a lot of corruption over there, so a lot of that money, not really sure where it's going, and even the weapons. And we showed you even during the early portion of this conflict that some of the weapons being sent over to Ukraine were ending up on the black market, on the dark web. We showed you. We found the sites where some of those arms are being sold after being siphoned off from the supply chain feeding the war machine in Ukraine. So is it over? No, I don't think so. And neither is the war in Gaza. And isn't it interesting to see that Israel breaking away from its friendly ties with Russia? It has been, kind of friendly, but in this address to the UN, Israel comes out hard against Russia, condemning Russia's attack on Ukraine. Focuses attention on the alliance between Russia and Iran. And Israel now, and I hope I wasn't I have to think back to what I was just saying. I think I was referring to Israel. Israel, I hope I was saying the right thing. Israel addressing the United Nations and now calling Ukraine an ally. This doesn't surprise me at all. I've been saying that the battle lines were drawn during the early portion of this conflict in Gaza, and well before, even, I think a long time before, honestly. It's just that now they're becoming clearer. You can see them. And what you have is Russia aligned with Iran, Arab nations in the Middle East, hunkered down and directly opposed to Israel. Russia supporting Hamas, Hezbollah, the Palestinian military effort in Gaza. And on the other side, you have the United States supporting Israel. And then you know how the alliances shake out over in Ukraine. And to some people, this seems maybe surprising. Not so much to me. It makes absolute sense. In fact, I would say that this shift, or maybe I'll call it clarification, this clarification of support from Israel for Ukraine was ultimately inevitable because of Russia's position supporting Iran, which then supports the Palestinian position in Gaza through Hamas. I see the whole situation in Gaza as a response to what has been happening in Ukraine. So you can assess it in different ways, but there is now no denying where the battle lines are being drawn. It's become very clear just within the last 24 hours. Let's take a look at this clip from the UN and what Israel had to say there. Are you guys in the chat telling me you're not getting any audio? Is that still the case right now? Can you hear me? I'll just look in the chat here to see if that's the case. I just happened to glance over. So you have no audio? No audio on that clip? No, what? Can you hear audio on the microphone? You hear me, but not the video. Very, very weird. All right. I don't understand that at all. Very odd. Okay. Well, very strange technical things have been happening here. So I'll tell you what. Yeah. Helena says CIA. Could be. It usually is. Whenever anything technical, bad happens, it's usually the CIA. CIA is responsible for all the bad things that happen. All the bad things. So you're not hearing this clip at all. You can't hear that guy? Not the video. Isn't that strange? Okay. All right, so let me just give you the short version. So he's saying, well, here, I'll skim through this, and I will tell you what this speaker is saying at the UN. Okay? So what he's saying is that Israel has been standing in solidarity with Ukraine, but now making it official. He's also saying that they understand the situation in Ukraine or can relate to it because, like Ukraine, he's saying Israel is under constant attack. That's his take on this. I know that in this address to the UN, he makes reference to Vladimir Putin and Russia hosting Hamas, Hezbollah, and the Houthis that he describes as terror organizations, saying that it's really the only place in the world where that can happen. Talks about the October 7th attack, the impact that had on Israel. It says that Israel is now working to provide Ukraine, is willing to provide Ukraine with early warning systems to save civilian lives from missile and drone attacks, because Israel has particular expertise in that area, since they have to live under an iron dome, because they are under and have been under constant missile attack for decades. So he says, and he is making reference here now to the October 7th attack and the deaths there that resulted in Israel from that attack. Talks about the effort to preserve Israel's sovereignty as a nation state, and also seems to find some similarities with what is going on in Ukraine. And technically, yes, that is one of the main, that is maybe at the heart of the issue from the one perspective, is national sovereignty. Does Israel have a right to exist as a nation state? Indeed, that is really at the heart of all of this, isn't it? But can a nation state, and I'm not saying he's saying this, I'm saying this now, but can a nation state like Ukraine just exist any way that it wants when it's living right on the doorstep of a superpower? And the situation in Israel is somewhat different. Different location, totally different set of circumstances there. But the overarching issue is, should they have the right to self-determination as a nation state? And there, here he is referring to Russia's support for Iran. He goes on and talks about Hamas, and of course the visit there this week to Moscow. Talks about Iran, Syria, the Assad government. And I'm sorry you can't get the audio on this. I don't know what the problem is. I am going to need to figure out the technical end on that, because it should be pumped in there. So he says Israel and Ukraine are the canaries in the coal mine to the rest of the free world. He says, wake up, wake up, wake up. I understand the perspective. I also understand the opposite points of view. And the solution's not easy. Texas, the wildfires down there continue to rage. So much land lost. Or maybe not the land itself, but what's on it. Homes, cattle. And we'll bring up a little bit of video here. This is now, I believe, it's the second, I think it's the second largest wildfire in American history, and now the largest wildfire in the history of the state of Texas. Yesterday we were at, originally, I think it was 450, then just over 500,000 acres burned. Then, before we signed off last night, the number was revised upward again to 850,000 acres burned. Now, tonight, just moments ago, I'm seeing an update coming in here. Now, well over 1 million acres burned in these wildfires in Texas, where the weather has been warm and dry, creating conditions that are conducive to combustion and the spread of fire, and made even worse because of high winds. And we are seeing emergency crews doing their best to respond, but in some areas they can't even get in to assess things, and the smoke is just unbelievable, as you can see. Aerial shot there showing the extent, how widespread these wildfires are down in Texas. As I said last night, here in Canada, in western provinces like Alberta, they are already zeroed in on the wildfire risk, which they expect will be high, very high again this season. Last year, massive wildfires in Western Canada spewed smoke all over North America. The smoke from those wildfires went down as far as New York City, causing haze, a yellow haze in the air, as you may recall. And officials in Western Canada saying, brace yourselves, because another rough wildfire season appears to be ahead of us. The question I have is, will the government be prepared this time? Will they have adequate resources in place? It certainly didn't seem like they had adequate resources last year, given that they've had now all winter and the spring to prepare. I would say there really should be no excuse. But of course, you have this new government now with Danielle Smith in Western Canada, in Alberta. We'll see how she responds under fire.
The information war is raging. Truth without integrity is worth nothing. Maverick News. Because those who have power and those who seek it must be held accountable.
The world is watching.
Join our family of truth seekers. Donate today and add your voice to the chorus of Maverick Knights. Donate at maverickdonations.com. Truth. Integrity. It's the Maverick way. Maverick News. The world is watching.
Okay, I am just checking the news wires here, and I see that former Prime Minister Brian Mulroney has passed away at the age of 84 tonight. This is a breaking news story just coming in this evening. According to the reports here tonight, he was surrounded by friends and family and passed away peacefully. He was also a divisive political figure in his day. I met him a few times, covered the campaign when he was first elected, covered the election where the issue of free trade was really the main issue. And that was the issue of free trade is still having impact today in really serious ways. That free trade agreement had serious implications for Canada, still playing out. Trump renegotiating NAFTA, turning it into the USMCA, United States-Mexico trade agreement, United States-Mexico Canada agreement, I guess is what it is. I shouldn't forget that, but yeah, it's the USMCA, replacing NAFTA. And I remember some people viewing Brian Mulroney at the time, when free trade was the pivotal issue in that federal election, saying that he was a visionary. Others at that time accusing him of being treasonous, betraying the country. Many people still viewing it that way, even as he passes away today. He won the leadership of the Conservatives in 1983, and then the next year became Prime Minister. Won a huge majority. Free trade, free trade. He was, I remember him as well, sitting there with the President of the United States singing "When Irish Eyes Are Smiling." Yep. With Ronald Reagan. Had the 1985 Shamrock Summit in Quebec City. I remember. Oh, did that ruffle the feathers of people on the left at the time? The NDP, New Democrats, Liberals. I remember, they just viewed Brian Mulroney at the time as being, they would, the word Nazi was thrown around quite loosely at the time, but that wasn't unusual. It hasn't been unusual. And I hate to even use that word in reference to him here tonight upon his passing. I just bring it up because of what Tucker Carlson said. You know, these phrases, I've seen the phrase Nazi used so loosely over the years to smear political candidates and politicians and people using it to smear their political opponents, to the point where now the phrase has really been watered down. It does the public a disservice, I think, by using it so often and so loosely. But I am a little off topic. Brian Mulroney, dead tonight at the age of 84. Now, because we're having these audio issues, we will wrap it up a little bit early tonight so that I can figure out what the heck has gone wrong with the audio system so that you weren't hearing the clips come through, or at least that one. So I will figure that out so that I can return tomorrow night. And we have another special guest booked for tomorrow. The proprietor of an online dating service for the unvaccinated. So you're not going to want to miss that, because that is a very unusual service. Again, people being proactive and taking steps to build something of a parallel society with parallel services designed specifically for freedom-focused people. So another special Maverick News broadcast tomorrow night, 6 p.m. Eastern, right here on the Maverick News channel, where we have the antivirus programs for your mind. Thanks, everybody, for watching. Catch you tomorrow night on the flip side.
This has been a Maverick Multimedia production.